Okay, everyone, welcome tonight to practice. Sorry it took so long to get set up, but in any case, here we are. Um, I was actually just sitting and reflecting on a year ago today, actually, exactly a year ago. Today, Lama Justin and I were in India because he dragged me to India. And as the pandemic was beginning, of course, when we left New York, we didn't. I mean, I don't think I even heard of the coronavirus when we left. We left the States the end of February, the 28th. I think February 28th, and like I had had no idea. Um, and I do remember a really strange thing because before we left, when I travel in India, I always like to take face masks. Sometimes you can just be in really kind of like super like sooty, dusty places, and that kind of gets kind of in your like nostrils and everything. So I like to always have a mask on hand to put on if I'm in areas like that. So I'd gone to Home Depot to pick up masks. And the strangest thing was that they were completely out of masks, and I asked, someone working there, and they also found it strange because they're like, oh, we always have tons of masks, all the time. We always have lots of masks. So I didn't really think much of it. I was able to buy actually a mask in India, which I still have, actually like an N95 like mask. But anyhow, but we left, went to India, and on this day, on which is today, March 3rd, we were at the site for Chinnamasta, for Ma Chinnamasta, who let me see. I don't know if I have anything. I don't have any of her iconography out in my space right now. But Ma Chinnamasta, of course, often is said to be very related to Vajrayogini, Red Dakini, and she severs her own head, and in the iconography, she's holding her head, and these like little streams of blood are coming out from her neck, and they're feeding people around her. And there's really a lot of different meanings associated with that iconography. But in any case, we were today at the site by the river where it was said that she first appeared to practitioners. And the site itself is like a really intense, like a temple site. It's very like the Shakti, right? This awakened kind of conscious energy, feminine, divine conscious energy. I mean, it was palpable. It was so the energy, the Shakti was so thick, it was like you could cut it. Like with a knife. It was so thick. And it's like entering, maybe some of you, have traveled in India and been to these sites, or similar sites. But to go to these sites that are laden with just centuries and centuries of devoted practice and puja and prayers, and for many sites, sacrifices, both animal and human sacrifices, all of that's there, and it's all that's really complicated. So go to these sites where it's just like for hundreds and hundreds, and I mean, I forget what the Chinnamasta site, I mean, just like maybe even 1,000 years or more, I don't know. practice and pilgrimage. And in cultures like Indian culture, the practice of pilgrimage is such an important practice. And I've done pilgrimage several times in India, Nepal, also in Sri Lanka. I've done pilgrimage in Sri Lanka. But just to go to these places and to pray and to worship and just to sit. And you go and you're surrounded by so many people who are just deeply devout. The devotion is overwhelming, and I love that. I consider myself a devotee of many things, many deities. Some things I'm a devotee to certain things that maybe aren't good for me, but my devotion to beings and things that incite liberation is one of the most important things for me. To be overwhelmed by something, to be moved by something, to believe that something can love you, can save you, to be in the presence of something that I guess it's love. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but for me, Shakti is love. So to be in spaces like this, for me, it's just about being loved. And when I talk about the mothers or the Mahavidyas, the great mothers, the great emanations of the mother, like Tara, and of course, Chinnamasta, Ma Chinnamasta, Chinnamasta Ma, Durga, Kali, and so forth. Dumavati, for me, is a manifestation of the mother of one of the Mahavidyas I feel very close to. I mean, to be in that kind of relationship, and to believe in that relationship. I mean, devotion is, on one hand, really personal. I mean, I would say it's really personal. For me, devotion was something that I kind of struggled with. I say kind of because it wasn't impossible, but it wasn't natural for me, if that makes sense. I was devoted to Dharma, and that was easy for me because I just felt deeply moved by Dharma and the teachings. Not so easy to be devoted to teachers and to the Sangha, and this, of course, the three gems, right? The three gems of Buddhism that we take refuge in. So that's one of the few things that we say defines a Buddhist practitioner is one's reliance on the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. I mean, nothing else beyond that, necessarily, and even meditation, not all Buddhist traditions emphasize meditation, like Sagoga Kai, for instance, SGA doesn't, they don't really meditate, but they have teaching, they do Dharma, and of course they're devoted to the mantra as well. But so when I started out, the Dharma was easy because the Dharma was what I really loved, and really took refuge in. And then when I started getting around teachers, of course, one of my first real important teachers was a teacher that Justin and I share, Lama Justin. or Sirin Wangdu Rinpoche, who I met early in my practice. Early in my practice, when I still had hair, um, I met Sirin Wangdu Rinpoche when I had enough hair, and I used to have cornrows. Actually, when I used to be hip, and he loved it. He was like, "What's this? Who are you?" Of course, in those days, there weren't. I stood out. Let's just say. In those days, I stood out, and I still stand out. But even with Wangdu, Sirin Wangdu Rinpoche, it took time for that devotion. I never met anyone that was that loving, that like. Wangdu Rinpoche reminds me of the ghost of Christmas Present from the Christmas Carol. Just like, well, back then, he's actually slimmed down quite a bit. But back then he was big man, really happy, like really generous, really inviting, just really just like full and life loving. And it was great, to begin to sit with him and to get these teachings. I think I mentioned this story last time I talked. It was during that period where I sat with, and Rinpoche was teaching for a week in Boston. In the early days of my practice, I sat with him every night, and then got some private time with him, that week as well. But the first night he taught, he did a healing show. I don't remember if I said that in this space or another space. Oh, I said it in the Tar practice a couple of weeks ago, where we sat and did this cha practice, and the first night of the practice, the advertisements, so the flyers on the email told us to all bring pillows and blankets to the first teaching of his residency in Boston. So I was just like, finally, the kind of Dharma that I love, the kind where we're invited to take naps during the teaching. Which is, this is really interesting because back then also, I was like so enthralled by Dharma teaching as well. Like I would just like listen like to every word of a Dharma teaching that someone was giving. I just like was inhaling it. I was drinking. I was like thirsty and hungry, and I was just like taking it all in. Even if I had no idea, what was being, taught, I was just like inhaling. So like I never went to sleep. I got bored in a Dharma talk. Of course, now that's a little different. But we brought our pillows and blankets to this first talk. And it wasn't many of us, it wasn't. I mean, maybe it was like 30, under 30. I would say about 25 to 30 of us in this space. And we all just kind of spread out, put our pillows and blankets down. And then, Rinpoche just starts doing cha, with the bell and the drum, cha drum. And of course, most of us drifted off into sleep. And this was a healing cha. Of course, Lama Wangdu is a lineage holder for severance. Of course, that's the same lineage Lama Justin holds. Lama Sirin passed that lineage to Justin. But I don't know if I knew Sirin Wangdu longer. I didn't know Justin back then. But anyhow, we did this healing cha, and I woke up, and my practice was completely different from that moment on. Something or somehow he removed an obstacle in my practice that helped me to extend how long I sat and the intensity of the practice, which was beautiful. And after that, I kept going back to him night after night, and we did Vajrayogini practice. We did a bunch of stuff. And that was like the root of my devotion to Sering Wangyu Rinpoche, because it was, I don't know, I felt loved and protected and seen by him in many ways. I felt taken care of. I mean, there was a level of generosity that he expressed. And he was, the first Tibetan teacher that I guess the first Tibetan teacher, not the first Tibetan teacher that I'd sat with, but he was definitely the first Tibetan teacher that I'd ever gotten private time with, to sit with and ask about my practice. And his granddaughter was his translator. Daishin is still his translator to this day, which is amazing. Justin and I last saw him 2 years ago out in Portland. And of course, Rinpoche used to come to New York all the time, and we used to see him in New York. And of course, no one's traveling right now because of the pandemic. But I remember after retreat, when I was teaching and running a center in DC, I, met Justin and his family and his co-teacher, Lama Sangye. And when we kind of connected, I think it was one of the first teachers that I helped them support at their Dharma Center in Brooklyn was Lama Wangyu. There was several Tibetan teachers that came through when I started hanging around. But Lama Wangyu came back, and that was the first time I'd seen him since going into retreat. And that was a really special moment. I have pictures. I take pictures of everything, so I have pictures of those days when Lama Wangyu. Well, actually, Lama Wangyu came several times, but that was I had pictures from the first time he came. Yeah. I guess, when I remember all this and think about this, there's a kind of warmth that comes up with this. I tend to always talk about the work that we have to do with teachers and how teachers really put us through it, but there's also the side of being in relationship to teachers where you feel the caring of the teacher, you feel the warmth of the teacher as well. And that's so much a part of the teaching. And that also intensifies the devotion for the teacher, feeling that warmth. Because again, devotion, I feel, is extremely personal in that way. And there are things about devotion that we can't articulate. This is why we come into Vajrayana and Tantric traditions and Vedic traditions and so forth. When we get into the space, it's volatile because this energy is volatile. This devotion, this deep relationship, this unarticulable relationship is multifaceted. Because my practice of devotion, there are many ways to think about it, but like one way I think about it is when my mind begins to mix with the enlightened wisdom mind of the teacher, and sometimes there is a conflation that happens, right? We begin to lose ourselves, and that's where I think a lot of the risk and danger emerges for people. It's like that mingling with the teacher. The mind of the teacher mingles with my mind, and of course, when we get into practices like Guru Yoga, which some of you have moved through before, you're like, imagine yourself to be the guru. the teacher. You begin to dream about the teacher. Everything is devoted to the guru, right? And that's like one way to think about it, but also the grander way, the ultimate way that we should also be thinking about devotion is that the teacher, the guru, is just reflecting back to us our own enlightened mind. So when we're mingling our minds with the enlightened mind of the guru, I mean, it's really our mind that we're learning how to be in relationship with. And yes, in another way, it looks like service to the teacher, right? And that all gets really complicated. And it's complex, it's subtle, and it's nuanced. I get, a lot of like with people who've never experienced something like this or had a relationship like this, it's hard to explain, When I use the word guru, I want to be actually very specific because most of us don't have a guru. First, in the Western context, guru and teacher, we have to kind of differentiate those words. A guru is like an enlightened master. This enlightened master. And that enlightenment, I mean, for me, a guru is the expression of a teacher that I feel everywhere, all the time, and in both being awake and being asleep. I also have a karmic capacity to be in relationships with gurus as well. And that's all really complicated as well. And one day, of course, I have to write more about this in some way because it's always an unfolding process for me. But I think I've always had this karmic tendency to trust myself, even though I think that I haven't always trusted myself, but I do have this deep like tendency, or this deep, not a tendency, but a deep, like a foundation. There's something that's really familiar about loving myself, trusting myself, coming back to myself, which serves as a foundation to hold a relationship with the guru. The guru isn't supposed to overwhelm us 100%. Like there's a piece of agency that we hold on to in the guru-student relationship. Now we can have we can have all kinds of relationships with teachers and mentors and elders and so forth, and it doesn't have to be that intense, But I come from past experiences of intense relationships with realized. I still am in a relationship with these people. I moved to Atlanta. One of the reasons I moved back to Atlanta was to be in closer relationship with one of my teachers. So it's weird. It's like you get into these spaces and, we start, when we have teachers that we love and we care about, or if we've had a guru, like that relationship looks so different. It looks from the outside, it's just, we look fanatic. Like all of my friends, no matter what tradition they're in, but if they're in a tantric centered tradition, be it Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedic traditions, whatever it may be, like we all have, all of our houses, personal spaces are filled with pictures of our teachers, and our lineage teachers. We have a picture of our teachers on our phones. Like we're always going around quoting our teacher. I mean, it's intense. Like that's, you come into my house, it's going to be everywhere is going to be, well, not everywhere, because I'm trying to limit, being super spiritual in my house. But, above my head here, right? I'll just show you here. Like above my head, I have pictures of a couple teachers. You only see one teacher. You see Ma Jaya. Of course, you see James Baldwin. And so that's kind of like, that's actually in my living room. I have pictures of Majaya and Lama Rinpoche, and I'm still unpacking. I still have all these pictures and stuff that I have still left in boxes, so I haven't unpacked everything. But yeah, it's a love is the way the Guru opens our heart, right? And how overwhelming that can be, and how grateful. Because devotion is gratitude too. It's like, look at what this being has given me, and what can I offer in return? Again, my orientation to all this is that the teacher is encouraging us not to worship them, but to do our practice, right? To engage in the teachings that they're offering us. And that's how I think ultimately we offer, devotion and service to the Guru, is to actually do the teaching, and to practice. For me, when I came to back then, Kagyu Tupching Sholing, now it's Palpong Tupching Sholing PTC. When I came to the monastery, like the ultimate form of devotion was to do 3-year retreat. And at the same time, it was the hardest fucking thing anyone could ever do. Was to do 3-year retreat. But that was for Norla Rinpoche, that was like the ultimate form of devotion, was for you to go through this experience, to study deeply, to practice deeply the teachings, instead of just relying on him for everything. And that was my ultimate form of offering, is doing the practice, and limiting the harm that I experience, that I direct towards myself, and the harm that I direct out to everyone else, to limit that, right? Even in ways that maybe my teachers can't or won't do, right? And that's all really complex. Like, we can look at the harm of the teachers, but we also have to look at also how the teacher has benefited people as well. And of course, that's always, people kind of, they can't hold space for that argument from me. But that's part of devotion. Like, it doesn't make sense, right? And we try to make it make sense. And it's the part of it that won't make sense, because samsara doesn't make sense. Reality doesn't make sense, right? None of this is supposed to be working the way it does, but it does. And so we're kind of coasting through this contradiction, second by second, And when you get really solidified on certain things, then you start sinking into the delusion of this place. So we have to stay in relationship to the contradictions. We have to stay in relationship to the tension that arises from the things that just don't make any sense. And we can get clear about certain things, absolutely, but there are certain things that just won't get clear. And we just have to, they just have to be, but to abide within this level of devotion, where ultimately devotion is helping us understand that we indeed have these seeds of awakening, of enlightenment within our own experience. Like to start believing that. That's where devotion is actually leading us to, is that deep trust, that faith that I can wake up, that I'm doing what I need to be doing to wake up. And that because I have these seeds of devotion, I realize that I am just like the teacher or the guru. That I'm just like the teacher. Regardless, I still have work to do, absolutely, but I still have those. See, the teacher isn't extraordinary. The guru isn't this. Well, on one hand, yes, the guru is extremely extraordinary, right? On the other hand, not so much, because they're not doing anything that I can't eventually obtain, right? Because I have the same seeds of awakening and enlightenment. I possess the same mind that is already awakened. So the teacher and the position of the guru and the teacher and their positionality is just looking back at us and saying, you can get here, and this is what you need to do, right? It may not be this lifetime, it may not be next lifetime, it may not be the next lifetime afterwards. Hell, it may not even be 10 lifetimes down the road. But if you commit yourself to the practice, you keep being brought back to this path of clarity over and over and over and over again, this path of awakening. This path of returning to our basic expression of being awakened energy itself, not just this body and this identity. The world is the guru. And that's what we learned in Vajrayana, particularly in the Guru Yoga teachings. That the world is the teacher. I guess Sankapa, you can read Sankapa and get some of this as well. I don't know, I forget if Sankapa really explicitly talks about the world as the guru, but the world phenomena, like the phenomenal reality, is always teaching us how to get woke. The teacher is manifesting in the teachings, the teacher is manifesting in the phenomenal reality. The teachers are manifesting as people, beings, and the teacher is manifesting as my own wisdom mind. These are I forget if this is exactly the 4 manifestations of the guru that we find in the traditional teachings, but these are definitely ways that the guru emerges for us, the teacher emerges for us, and we're being taught to pay attention to how we're constantly being instructed. Of course, Mahamudra comes in. Mahamudra says, okay, everything. Everything is teaching us that phenomena arises, and because phenomena arises, it is actually telling us that it actually doesn't exist. The great seal, Mahamudra, which means the great seal, the great gesture, right? The great gesture of Mahamudra, or the great gesture that Mahamudra is, rather, is how phenomena is gesturing back to its fundamental lack of existence, its fundamental space, emptiness, luminosity. And devotion as a practice opens the door into that fundamental awareness of the nature of things, because devotion is an experience of expansion, of spaciousness, of letting go, of heart opening. The heart opens, and we're experiencing everything, and there's space to experience everything. And in that space, we begin to develop an intuition of the nature of things. Things get real loose, real, kind of like spacey, and now it's just, for me, it's like I have only to think about my teachers, and they are present with me. They're with me. If my teachers were enlightened, which I believe they were, particularly my teachers who have passed on from this life, if they were enlightened, then all space, they're manifesting within space itself, And to recognize that and to always know that you're never alone is very, like, that's something that takes us into the moment of our death. That trust that the teacher is always there is what carries us into the bardo. And of course that's Vajrayana teaching. Just like our devotion actually, is what opens the door to entering into the bardo, right? Because that devotion, and again, that devotion is the recognition that space itself is the teacher, or space itself. As I think about Shimachina Master a year ago, recognizing that space itself is the mother. Like, space is the mother. And we say, oh, space is so uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable because we're so fixated on this sense of identity, this sense of ego. We want to stay small, but instead we've been offered this limitless space to expand into. And that's terrifying, because we don't know space. Like, we don't understand that freedom. We don't get freedom. It's like it. But the weird thing about freedom is that we're so much more practiced at being confined and imprisoned. And we get that, and we know that, we've rehearsed that over and over and over again. But when freedom comes about, we don't know how to relate to that freedom. We've never been taught how to be free. And I think my experience of devotion has been a training of how to be free, and how to take responsibility for that freedom. But again, I have to emphasize that devotion isn't fun. Like, it's not fun times. It's not a parade. It's not Christmas morning. It's not a piece of chocolate cake. It's work, because we're being over and over again taught to trust ourselves. When we have teachers and gurus who are emphasizing that we should be there are gurus, teachers in the world, cult leaders, who create systems and communities and environments where they're directing all the attention to them. They manipulate people, and I've experienced that too, because I do believe my monastery culture was a cult culture. There was harm and abuse happening. But when you have teachers who are like, oh, worship me, and that's a sign, like, they're not there for your liberation. They're there for their gratification. There are a lot of people who are indeed really realized, but they have all these unmet needs, and they actually don't know how to get those needs met outside of their relationship to people who are devoted to them, and that's dangerous as well. I mean, there's so many. I spend a lot of time studying and reading about cults and watching all the documentaries, and because I'm really interested, as someone who as I believe that I was in a cult, you know. As someone who like fell into a culture like that, I'm really interested in how that happened. And, because I'm very skeptical and critical of things, but somehow me and countless other people land in these communities, and then you're like, what the fuck happened? Like, that's not, that's the hard thing about being in the cult, because all along, like, you're just like, oh, this is a, like, I'm not in the cult because, like, I'm critical and independent and I have agency and I'm aware and I'm making a choice, when in fact, part of that experience has been a lot of brainwashing, a lot of ways in which your agency has been eroded. Um, and you've kind of, there's something that you've loved that's drawn you deeper into something, and then you want to stay in proximity to that thing that you love, and so you start compromising your agency. There are these studies, many studies around cults. And one of the, so some of the material, that comes out of psychology looks at like groupthink, right? Like how we actually bypass like our rational mind in order to fit into a group. If everyone else is doing it, you go, well, I guess everyone's right. Right? That's a huge part of cult training. Like, we get that subtle pressure, and we want to belong, and we don't want to be outside, and we want to get this thing that we love. So we just start doing everything, and everyone's really into something. You're like, oh, everyone's seeing something and experiencing something because they're so much more enlightened and realized than I am. So I'm just going to fake it. And then that faking it actually turns into that kind of brainwashing experience, where you're just like in this groupthink process, and then something happens. You see the crack in everything. And that's what a lot of us experience over time. You see the crack, and that crack is like, whoa, what's that? I thought this was perfect. And then that crack gets bigger and bigger, and you see all the flaws, and you're like, what the fuck was I doing? What was I buying into? And for me, going through my monastery experience, I saw all the signs. Like, looking back, I was like, oh, I knew exactly, I didn't know harm and abuse was happening, but I knew that, like, there were secrets and there was a hierarchy, and that we were all being forced to be in certain places. And I just said, well, everyone else seems to be cool with this, and I just felt like that was inherently a part of the structure of getting the things that I need. I wanted to get the Dharma, right? And so I had to like buy into the structure to get what I needed, and of course, fooling myself and saying, well, everyone else was so much more woke than I was. And so, yeah, of course, everyone else is right. I'm the one who's faking it, and so forth and so on. But that's all really complex. She was extremely complex. But again, we talk about the central figure. One of the defining characteristics of a cult is allegiance to a charismatic leader. And the total power and control of that charismatic leader, which was, the culture of the monastery, and also the culture of Tibetan Buddhism, and Vajrayana traditions. But, it's like, where's your agency? Like, I just feel as if the key to my awakening is the belief that at the end of the day, it's up to me to do work, to get free, to remember who I am, right? Not to expect the guru or the teacher to do all this work and labor for me, that I have to do labor. Of course, many of us have seen the documentary Wild Country with Osho and like that whole community out in Oregon. And that's real, that's a real thing that happened. And that thing continues to happen. Maybe not on that scale, but like there are communities all over the world, where people have lost a sense of agency and self and are completely aligned with the guru that's not actually trying to get them free, but who's just like getting off on the worship and devotion. But this is a tough thing. Devotion isn't this easy thing that we sashay into, because it takes incredible awareness, it takes incredible skillfulness. So anyway, going back to what I opened up with tonight, like this whole, just being in India this time last year, being in Chinnamasta and being at this temple. And I guess what my experience was being at the site of this temple was that somehow I was being deeply loved. Like that was being completely, deeply loved by the mother, right? That there was devotion to the mother, but there was not this sense of losing myself in the mother, outside of like trying to lose myself in love itself. Because that love means that I want people to be safe and free from harm. So if that's the kind of love we're losing ourselves in, that's the love that we need to go towards. To do devotion, to, of course, my experience, often being the only person of, the sites that we went to, we were actually often the only, Justin and I were the only Westerners, and these sites, Justin really keeps it real with this shit. He's like, we are going to go places that no one's ever been, that people outside of India don't even know about, and he'll find like these rare sites in the middle of nowhere, and like we hired a driver, and this driver, was just like, I don't know what y'all are doing, I don't know where we're going, and he didn't speak English, so we're just like, and Justin just has like he's just like, I kind of know where this thing is, and we're like stopping along the road, talking with people, like, have you seen this temple? But in India, there's temples everywhere. Like there's temples everywhere. So it's like, how do you find this one specific temple? But we found him. We definitely found him. But that's devotion. Devotion makes you do those things. You're being led by the mother, the deity, to go to these sites, to experience and to be blessed and to absorb, centuries of devotion, positive energy, and you absorb that, you feel it, you get inspired, like it awakens your mind and your heart, and you're dwelling within the spaciousness in these places. Even though people are just looking at you like you're like from another planet. They're like, what are you doing here? I would get asked that. I would get asked that by Indians. They would just be like, can you go away? Why are you here? Yeah, no, seriously. And just like, and that's it. It's not about this body and the identities that I come from. It's about these past lives of doing this work over and over again. And when people, this is the thing about devotion, like you can feel people's devotion and you can connect to that. There's a sense of familiarity, there's a sense of belongingness, of when other people are, of course that's the risk as well, as we talked about, but you can feel one's deep devotion, and I love, like, literally all of my friends are devoted to a path, to a teacher, to a guru, and that shapes how they show up in the world in a way that I trust, and often with people, friends who aren't devoted to a path, who aren't devoted to a teacher, I feel And this is not a judgment, but I'll just say this. I just feel like they're kind of lost. They're unanchored. Like they're not being held. They're not, the refuge isn't there for them. I don't know if that's hard or not, but I mean, I don't know, but I can't be in the world, particularly as the world is right now, without devotion to Dharma, to the path, to teachers, gurus, to deities. To know that I'm being held and watched and taken care of. You know, as we talked about, for those of you who joined us for Medicine Buddha on Monday night, you know, we started talking about, you know, ghosts and demons, which is a whole other thing I can spend hours talking about. But like, for me, my fear of the unknown, unseen world decreased because of my devotion to the mother and to teachers and gurus who I felt whose energy was protecting me. Also to my ancestors, to devotion to my ancestors, you know, to God, to guides and guardians, to Dharma protectors, right? To Bernachan and to Shadrupa, and Shadrupa, 6-armed Mahakala, is like my personal, you know, kind of protector. Kali, you know, is also really close with me as well. But of course, Mahakala and Mahakali are considered to be expressions of each other as well. But you know, I'll just finish with this. But you know, just being at Chinnamasta site last year, I mean, it was a real thing. I know many of you have never experienced this, but it was a real, you know, human sacrifice, not human sacrifices, but I mean, there are still human sacrifices that happen. You know, not just in India, all over the world, like human sacrifices. You know, it's a part of many paths, but at Chinnamasta, the Chinnamasta site, there were goats because she is aligned with goats. So a lot of Chinnamasta, we were there one day. We spent 2.5 days there one day, a day and a half, maybe 2 days there. But anyway, one of the days, the second day we were there, it was like the public kind of goat sacrifice. So, and goats their heads were being severed. And that's something, you know. Both of us actually we were like super jolted from that. I don't know if it was negative jolting, but it's jolting. Like that's when you find yourself in ancient cultures, which, you know, these are ancient cultures here in the United States, right? You know, we have indigenous culture here, which is not public because of colonization and genocide, but it's still happening. Ancient cultural practices are still here. When you go to places like India that, for the most part, maintained continuous, you know, practices like this, even through colonization, you know, even though some of them had to go underground, but it was still happening. You feel like, you know, these ancient rituals, you feel this connection, you feel the complexity of what's happening. And the ancient, like you're talking about ancient beings, ancient energies that are older. I mean, they are as old as the universe, right? As old as, in this world system or this planet, as old as the first person who was able to articulate an experience, you know. of these ancient beings, these ancient energies. And you become a part of that. You touch into that. You tip into it, and there's a jolt. There's a rearranging of things for you. There's a recognition that what you see and hear and taste and touch and what you can perceive, that's like that's almost a lie. Like the phenomenal world's almost lying to you because there's this whole other thing happening. There's this whole other reality, multiple realities happening at once, and these beings that are happening, and and you're not this body, and you're like, and you've been so many things before, and you will be many more things in the future lives. Like the complexity, the multiplicity of existence, just like it just breaks open. And you're jolted, you're changed. You get changed from that. That's what we're working with, is what we're doing. We're trying to touch into that because we're too material. Like we've aligned ourselves with materialism, with the material world, right? We're trying to get less material, more fluid, and more open, and more spacious. We had a lot of good karma on that trip. I think we may have contracted COVID on that trip as well, because as soon as we got back to New York, I mean, I was in New York during the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, I think we may have picked it up as soon as we got back, as we, for those of us who were here in April, I guess, those of us who were really, when we really began to do this stuff in April online, Lama Justin was sick. He was getting sick at the end of March after we got back, so who knows? But anyhow, we had all this good karma, and of course one of those karmas was not like breaking down and in India, but like we did have car breakdowns in India and everything. But our last night at the Chinnamasta site, we got invited to like this really secret puja in front of the main icon of the site, which you don't get to see, but somehow we had made friends with someone who had a connection to the pujaris who did puja every night, and that pujari was like, "Oh, come with me. We'll go and we'll do. I'll take you to this puja that only a couple of people can go to every night." So we went, and just being a part of puja that was centuries and centuries and centuries old, to sit there, to just have those experiences where you begin to get a glimpse of the reality that you're not what you think you are, that there's a whole complexity to you and to the universe. And to do this really hard work of trusting all of that. To trust that. And when you get there, when you get to that place, where you get to that little like sliver of experience, then your practice changes. The forms that you get, or you've been working with these forms, and that some of us have moved through in Tibetan Buddhism. You're like, oh, these forms don't work for me anymore, because I actually don't need a form like I used to need a form. I can just go to that experience, that sliver of experience, and I can create the ceremonies and rituals that actually continually unlock the door for me. And I think this is what we're doing in Bhumisparsha. It's like we're doing this diligence of understanding the why we have forms, and we're asking ourselves, what else can we do that's more appropriate for us? I'm very grateful to have the life that I have. I haven't always been grateful. I didn't start getting grateful till I was about 25 or 26. But I'm grateful to, just to have this experience, just to say, oh, like, this is what we're doing. This is what's happening. This is who I am. And to have that intense trust and confidence in everything, that the universe actually, despite its complexity, its overwhelming trauma, is actually pointing towards liberation if I can just pay attention. Again, phenomenal reality through Mahamudra, through the system, is saying that everything's arising to get us free, but we have to pay attention. If we don't pay attention, then we get lost in the delusion that takes us deeper into samsara. And to allow your heart to be filled with the love of the teacher, the love of the mother, the love of medicine Buddha. Whatever we're doing, it's like our hearts are being filled with this. And when your heart is filled, you let go into the sea, this ocean of space and clarity and compassion and love. And that's the freedom that we're trying to get into. But it's trusting yourself. And you trust your teacher to do that, to help you move into that expansion. Well, so thank you, everyone. I know we've gone over a little bit. I will be with you all again next week, and then we'll go back into having our guest teachers come through. But I may continue this again. I see that Payne has mentioned Tarapith. Tarapith was a whole nother story altogether. So it was like night and day in terms of Chittamasta and Tara. But thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Sorry for the lateness in the start, but things happen. It's okay. So I will see you again next week, and all the programs are happening. Join us Sunday. We're doing our new practitioner session, which will be held once a month. So come for that. It's not just for new practitioners, for everyone. We're going to be talking about what practices, and after that, we'll the months after will be different things that we'll do for that space. Okay. Right. So I will see you all later. All right, everyone, be well. Thank you.